This conversation comes at a time when India is in the midst of a general election and the economy is at the center of it all. The pace of growth in India, the kind of jobs that are to be created, and the economic costs of some of the poll promises that are being made in poll season that will impact every Indian is what we will discuss today with IMF Executive Director Dr. KV Subramanian. Thanks so much, sir, for taking out the time to speak to NDTV.
My pleasure, Gauri.
Sir, firstly, the IMF report card that has come out as far as the health of the global economy, it puts India right at the center in terms of becoming being a key driver of global growth. How satisfied are you with the numbers that are being put out, given that you've felt in the past and successively that India can actually achieve 8% and higher growth rates?
So, Gauri, if you look at the numbers that have been put up for the year 2023, which actually corresponds to our financial year ending March of 2024, IMF is estimating growth at 7.8%. And I think that is closer to what I expect. You would recall that in the first three quarters, we've had growth of 8.2%, 8.1%, and 8.4%. And so even with a lower, that compared to these three quarters, even at 7.3% growth in the fourth quarter, which I think the numbers will come out in May, India will have annual growth of 8%. So the 7.8% estimate for 2023 is closer to what I expect. For the next year, which is 2024, the fund has estimated growth at 6.5%. I think that it's likely that growth will be 7% and thereabouts. So I do think that there is scope, as it has happened. If you notice, the projection for even this year, fund's projection originally was significantly lower. And as the numbers have come through, they've actually revised it upwards. I expect a similar thing to happen, I guess, for the next year as well.
But why do you think, or do you think that there is a disconnect between how you view India's economic potential as compared to how IMF views the same?
So if you go by the data, in September of 2021, when we were emerging out of the pandemic, in my media interactions, I had mentioned that India will have 7% plus growth. And that is what has indeed transpired. If you look at the projections of the fund, IMF staff's projections, they have been less than 7%, while growth has actually been more than 7%. So I guess the data speaks for itself.
We're speaking at a time when global majors are set to come to India, make big ticket investments, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Apple, they're all looking to make India their manufacturing hub. This will give a fillip to India's aspirations to be a manufacturing hub. But how far do you think we are from achieving those kind of ambitions?
So I think these developments are very, very important, especially Tesla. And Apple has already set up shop. And, when I was checking some of the data, about 150,000 jobs have already been created direct jobs have been created by Apple establishing, in India. And, about 4 trillion rupees of, iPhones have been produced in the last year, of which about 1.2 trillion just for exports. And this with only 14% of global production of Apple, happening in India. So you can, get a sense of how, important some of these very important manufacturers, setting up shop in India will be for India's manufacturing sector growth. I think Tesla will be very important. If you look at, the experience that we had with the automobile sector in the 1980s, the Maruti 800, for instance, was just being assembled in India, with all the components being imported from Suzuki. But over decades, actually, the entire ancillary and the entire support system, developed, which is testimony to the way, a sector grows. Same is now happening with electronics manufacturing as well. So I think given the importance of Tesla and especially e-vehicles, I think this would be a very, very important marquee investment for India and its manufacturing sector growth.
So you think Tesla coming to India could be the big game changer that Indian manufacturing has been waiting for?
Well, I would say that, Apple coming in, setting shop, Samsung, I think all of those very important landmarks. In a similar way, Tesla coming, will certainly be an important landmark as well.
Dr. Subramanian, shifting focus now also to some of the other economic aspects of this election. It's poll season. There are poll promises galore. I have to ask you this as an economist. What do you make of some of these promises, like the 1 lakh rupee promise to all that is being made? How much does that undermine India's economic strength, or do you think it is something that India's economic fundamentals will allow?
Yeah, Gauri, you're drawing me into areas that I generally do not like commenting on. But I'll give you an economic perspective. I don't think, I will say anything on the political aspects. From an economic perspective, actually, I've written, in the 2019-20 economic survey as well that if India has to grow and become, a very, very, robust economy, large economy with high GDP per capita, it is wealth creation that has to be actually focused on. And you will also recall in the 2020-21 economic survey, we had a chapter on, growth and inequality. Is there a real sort of tension, or is there, as it is in the advanced economies, or is it different in India? And we provided very clear evidence that we have to be careful not to just, cut, paste, and, some of the arguments and some of the narratives that happen in the West. We provided a plethora of evidence there showing that in the West, possibly because of their much lower growth potential, inequality does lead to socioeconomic indicators, being much poorer. On the other hand, in India, actually, that is not the case. There is no such correlation. And a lot of the commentary on these aspects, I think, focuses or just does not, think very carefully about, what is applicable for India. This cut-paste phenomenon of just, narratives that prevail in the advanced economy, cut it and paste it to India. I think it's a manifestation of that. When you think very carefully, about what is right for India, I think India has to grow. I have absolutely no hesitation about that.
I'll tell you why I'm saying that,
plus
sir.
touching 8%.
I'll tell you why I'm asking you that, sir. There are 20 lakh households in the country that have been designated poor, which are to be given rations free by the state. Now, even if one were to say that 1 lakh rupee not to an individual but to a family that has been designated poor, then you're talking about 20 lakh rupees. That's just basic back of the envelope calculations. 20 lakh rupees is a very sizable amount that we are talking. And if you're talking about growth projections of a country, then we have to account for these kind of possibilities as well.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm asking you, sir, can we afford this? Can India afford this?
Which is why I was actually, and that's why I was explaining, Gauri, that I emphasize far more on growth and the enlargement of the pie. I think that is very important. If we look at the way in which welfare programs have been made far more efficient, look at the benefits we've had from direct benefit transfers, those are definitely commendable, and we should actually definitely continue and redouble. But this kind of explicit, redistribution, I don't think those are economically very, very good. If you look at, and I think let's take the example of what has happened, in the south, in Karnataka, those 5 freebies that were promised, actually, a state that was in very good fiscal situation just within, less than 2 years is actually now, it seems to be in a fiscal problem. And I think that is that provides very good evidence for what, these kind of ideas will, to me, if I may actually, I think that these suggest that there isn't adequate creativity, in the economic ideas that are coming from some of the quarters. Just to give you again a math, the private consumption expenditure, the consumption survey that came in using the $1.9, purchasing power parity threshold. Clearly the poverty has significantly declined from 12% in 2012 to 2% in 2022, and yet we are actually and this is the benefit not of this kind of wealth redistribution, but really focusing on enhancing the efficiency of the welfare programs and growth. And so the evidence is very clear that which direction we should be going.
So you mentioned Karnataka. Would you say that Karnataka should be seen as a cautionary tale for any of such promises to be made. Would you say that?
Yes, indeed.
So, and you would say that for wealth redistribution as well, because that's another area where a
Yes.
lot of promises are being made.
Absolutely. I think let me point out this example, right? Because in the 1980s, we had a government which had the marginal tax rate at 97%. Obviously that was a significant effort at redistribution using slogans like Garibi Hatao, etc. We know very well what that led to. Even for instance, as of 2012, poverty was 12%. So neither the redistribution nor those slogans like Garibi Hatao actually really had the impact. In contrast, good growth and focusing on enhancing efficiency of the welfare programs has had its impact. Poverty has reduced drastically from 12% to 2%. Even if we use a higher threshold of $3.2 in 2011 purchasing power parity per capita per day,
Okay.
poverty has reduced significantly from more than 50% to less than 30%. So I think as an economist, I see the data, and I think some of these ideas actually have been tried and have not been successful. I'm sort of surprised why the same sort of old wine actually, which is sort of has not worked very well, is being peddled again.
Thanks so much, Dr. Subramanian, for speaking to us and putting this in perspective, that some of these promises that have been made in the past have not had the desired outcome. Growth should be the template instead of some of these promises that have been made, even as data seem to suggest that India is on its track to being the growth driver for the world. But will these promises come in the way remains to be seen. We'll know that answer only on 4th of June. Thanks so much, Dr. Subramanian, for taking out the time.
My pleasure.